Pregnancy and childbirth presented the medieval expectant mother with a whole host of challenges and dangers. Just as today, there was a lot of instruction on how a pregnant woman should behave to ensure a safe birth and a healthy baby. Let's travel back in time now and learn about some of the weird and wonderful pieces of advice that were being offered up. From making sure not to eat a hare's head to avoiding being hit in the face by a strawberry, here are some tips to prepare for childbirth in the Middle Ages. Welcome to Medieval Madness. Baby, hold on. Being pregnant today can be a minefield of what you should and should not do. Don't sleep on your back, don't drink alcohol or certain teas, don't eat soft cheese or take hot baths. And there are still some old wives' tales about how to tell if you are carrying a boy or a girl. The medievals were a superstitious bunch and also had their rules for getting pregnant, keeping themselves and the fetus safe during pregnancy, and delivering a healthy baby. But their ideas were a little different than what they are today. Having children was all-consuming for the medievals. After all, it was one of the primary reasons for getting married. Most families worked on the land, and the family unit was needed to make the farming economy work. Nothing was more valuable than having sons to help with the ploughing or daughters to support their mothers with the household chores. Among the elite, a child could carry on the family name and make an advantageous marriage. Many of these unions, especially those involving royalty, were arranged while the bride and groom were still children. Don't worry, baby. Trotula are a group of 3 texts about women's medicine that were written in the 12th century in the town of Salerno, Italy. At the time, Salerno was considered the most important center for the introduction of Arabic medicine into Western Europe. Naturally, some of the topics covered include chapters on childbirth and pregnancy. Advice on getting pregnant includes, quote, taking the testicles of an uncastrated male pig or a wild boar and drying them and letting a powder be made. The woman must then drink this powder with wine after the purgation of the menses. Then let her cohabit with her husband, and she will conceive. In the 15th century French text, the Distaff Gospels, advice and wisdom are shared between 6 peasant women and were written down by a male narrator somewhere in either Flanders or Picardy. Their suggestions about procreation include the following. Make sure that the husband does not have stinky feet when having sex, or else the child will be smelly for all of its life. If a woman is a virgin and sleeps with a sexually inexperienced man, then the child would be born, quote, simple. Children being procreated between a nun and a priest is not advised, as the child will have all sorts of problems. The Trotula also recommends that women with narrow vaginas should not have sexual relations with men lest they conceive and die. But all such women are not able to abstain, and so they need our assistance. It also says, quote, any woman who does not wish to conceive, let her carry against her nude flesh the womb of a goat which has never had offspring. In another fashion, take a male weasel and let its testicles be removed and let it be released alive. Let the woman carry these testicles with her in her bosom and let her tie them in goose skin, and she will not conceive. In trying to conceive a boy, the Distaff Gospels recommends getting the father to turn and face east whilst having intercourse or have sex in the morning. If the woman clenches her fist while her husband, quote, does nature's work, that will also make sure she has a boy. To conceive a girl, it's thought having sex in the evening should work. Once a woman had conceived, there were also ways to determine the gender of an unborn baby, like deciding which side a mother is carrying the fetus on, whether she likes to eat venison or poultry, or even which foot she steps forward with first when walking. Oh baby baby. Most medieval women wouldn't have even known they were pregnant until they experienced the quickening, which was the child moving in their body. Many were pregnant for several months before they even realized. There were no reliable pregnancy tests during the Middle Ages. A physician might examine the shade of a woman's urine to see if it was a white to pale yellow color with a cloudy surface, but that was hardly reliable. Other tests included leaving a needle in the urine to see if it rusted. Just a lack of regular menstruation was not always a sign of pregnancy for the medieval women, as several things could cause that, such as illness, breastfeeding, excessive fasting for religious reasons, or a poor diet. This was the Middle Ages after all, a time dominated by the Catholic Church and not known for having a healthy population. Love to love you, baby. Once a woman had become pregnant, staying in that state and having a healthy baby was of the utmost importance. The 6 peasant women warned not to eat a hare's head because the child would have a split lip. Throwing strawberries, cherries, or red wine into an expectant woman's face was also a no-no, as that would cause the child to have marks on its body. Eating white bread was a good idea to get a small baby, which would be easier to birth. Eating fish heads should be avoided, or the baby could be born with a mouth slightly more turned up and pointed, and pregnant women shouldn't be anywhere near swords or sharp weapons, although if this was unavoidable, then touching her on the head with the flat of the sword would calm her and ensure any future child was brave. As far as eating was concerned, as well as avoiding fish heads, the Trotula states that, quote, "When the woman is in the beginning of her pregnancy, care ought to be taken that nothing is named in front of her which she is not able to have, because if she sets her mind on it and it is not given to her, this occasions miscarriage." The Distaff Gospels agree, adding that talking about any food which cannot be immediately obtained will cause the baby's body to be marked. The Trotula goes on to talk about a form of disordered eating that we know today as pica, advising the woman who desires clay or chalk or coals, let beans cooked with sugar be given to her. Pica is particularly common during pregnancy when a woman will crave or eat things that have no nutritional value, like soil, soap, or paper. Born to be my baby. When the time of birth arrived, the midwives needed to attend. During the labour of a woman named Eliza Middleton in the 12th century, 7 midwives were in attendance. Almost all medieval women gave birth at home, surrounded by midwives, female relatives, and friends. The wealthy often retired to a birthing chamber, a dark, calm, and comfortable room with soft furnishings, at least a month before their due date. Hospitals were few and far between, and birthing wards were a last resort for those unmarried women who found themselves pregnant. They often abandoned their newborns because of the social stigma attached to their situation. The Santa Maria della Scala Hospital in Italy had a rotating box in the wall where babies could be left anonymously. There were also beds for wet nurses to feed the infants. Midwives were supposed to act as moral judges as well as look out for cases of illegitimacy and infanticide. In France and Germany, midwives received professional training and were officially employed by the town authorities. In England, however, their conduct often came under scrutiny, and in 1481 the midwife Agnes Marshall was suspected of witchcraft and accused of using magical incantations to help with a birth. Surgeons and physicians were hardly ever called on to assist during labour, though they might be sent for during an aristocratic birth, although that didn't guarantee the safety of either mother or babe. Queen Blanche of Anjou, wife to James II of Aragon, had a physician in attendance during all her confinements. Nevertheless, in 1310 she died soon after she had delivered her 10th child, Violante. Medieval men, although never in attendance at the birth, were still invested heavily in it being successful. After all, the continuation of their family line was at stake. In 1441, a woman from Norfolk named Margaret Paston gave her husband a protective ring to wear while she was pregnant, to make sure that he shouldered some of the responsibility for her safe pregnancy and delivery. The Trotula states that those having difficulty delivering should be bathed in infused water and have their, quote, "belly, hips, and vagina anointed with oil and rubbed vigorously, let sneezing be provoked with powder of frankincense placed in the nostrils." If there are still problems, then she should be led about at a slow pace through the house, and those men who assist ought not to look her in the face because women are accustomed to be shamed by that during and after birth. It continues to say that if the child does not come out in the manner which it ought, there were several remedies such as having, quote, "summer savoury ground and tied upon the belly, or salt water, rose water, or ass's milk being given to drink. Or let names be written on cheese and butter and given to eat. She could drink the milk of another woman, or have the root of the gourd tied to her loins." Praying to one of the medieval saints who championed a safe pregnancy and birth was always worth a shot, such as the Virgin Mary, Saint Margaret, or the lesser-known Giulietta and her son Quirinus. Jointly martyred, they represented the special relationship between mother and child. If a medieval woman was lucky enough to have a safe delivery, the 6 peasant women of the Distaff Gospels had some ideas to ensure that the baby had a successful life. Touching its head with the umbilical cord guaranteed, quote, "a long life, sweet breath, a good voice, and pleasing and elegant speech." But you should be careful not to carry the baby with your left hand before the baptism, or they would be left-handed. Baby, can I hold you? After the birth, women were forbidden to go to church until they had been cleansed. Sex was acceptable within a marriage because of the need for procreation, but it was still seen as something sinful. A woman had to wait 40 days until her churching could take place. Even the Virgin Mary was tainted with the unclean nature of childbirth. Her churching was celebrated at Candlemas, a holiday held 40 days after Christmas. Today, we can only imagine how harrowing the experience of labour must have been for a medieval woman, with no modern pain relief or medical help. Most women today can discuss pregnancy and childbirth openly, but in the Middle Ages it was a private affair. For the medieval woman, giving birth was a dangerous time, and there was no discrimination between rich or poor mothers, older or younger. Anyone could die, not only during the birth, but also from complications afterwards, and sadly during that time more than 1 in 3 women died during their childbearing years. Perhaps the best way to survive pregnancy during the Middle Ages was never to get married and become a nun instead. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Medieval Madness. Please do subscribe if you're enjoying this video, and I'll see you next week for another one. Until then, hope everyone has an awesome week. Cheers!